G'day and welcome to Dog Talk. I'm Dan Camilleri.
And I'm Laura McKillop. We'd like to start by thanking Enduro for their ongoing support in bringing you our live weekly Q&A. Tonight, we're fortunate enough to be speaking with Meg and Ricky Hutchinson from Littledale Sheepdogs.
Obviously, we're not live tonight because Meg and Ricky are all the way in the UK.
Force of habit.
Force of habit. But anyways, Meg and Ricky will be picking who they think have asked the best question of the night, and they will win a bag of Enduro Plus high-energy food for working dogs with real kangaroo meat.
Hey, how you guys going?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for jumping on. And you guys in the middle of lambing there?
No, we're in the final throws now. There's not many left at all. It's getting to the stage now where the Lord is my shepherd because he's on a cheap hourly rate, so he looks after him from now on.
Love it. We'll start by, do you guys want to tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, what you do, and how it came to be?
Okay, cool. So we're a husband and wife team. I've been brought up in Littledale. In fact, this is my family home on the farm. So I started running dogs. Basically, my father's family have always been into sheepdogs and sheepdog trials, and my father's been into breeding. He used to run a little bit, but only on small scale local trials. But it's always been around me as I was brought up. So I started trialing as soon as I had a dog, in my teens. And then so that's where I am, and I've moved to different places around the country, but yeah, I'm back at the family farm now with Meg. So
yeah, and I'm from a long way from here, which compared to Australia is tiny. I'm from Norfolk, so I grew up on a livestock farm at the bottom at the other end of the country from here, and then we met through dogs.
Mm-hmm. Met dogging.
If I can understand that.
Oh, he did.
And
don't check your searches for your dogging in. That's all I can say.
Given my first dog at the age of 10, and then been trialing ever since. And then that's how we met the dog scene, not dogging, the dog scene. And then I moved to Lancashire.
That came later.
Yeah, years later. And that's
2017 you moved up?
Yes.
Black Wednesday it was. We basically we've got a family farm where we lamb around 600 sheep, small fry for you guys, Swaledale sheep, and a few Dales breds and a few mule things, but yeah, we do a lot with the dogs as well, training dogs, training people, that's that type of thing. Until COVID, I used to go away on trips, doing clinics regularly, 12 to 14 every year, but since COVID came and stopped me, I haven't actually gone again, and I probably will do again, but sort of the 5 years up to COVID, I've done about 170 flights, just going all over Europe and America doing stuff. So
we do some from home now.
And we did a little bit of online training during COVID and stuff. So, but yeah, we've got 4 children. I've got two elder children from my first marriage who are 13 and 11, and then we've got Dylan, who is just with my parents next door.
He's the very loud one.
Yeah, we thought we didn't want to show my training expertise with children because the long line doesn't work as well with him. And then we've got little Nora who's sat next to us here, and she is 8 weeks. So yeah, that's us.
Yeah, beautiful.
Fantastic.
Did you guys ever think about doing anything else?
No.
Yeah.
We do say occasionally, you said if we weren't into the dogs, would we found like another like golf or some other hobby, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think because we started so young with the dogs, it's kind of all we've ever known, and we're that passionate about it. Nothing else has really come on the scene. So
I think also the passion and the endurance of going to it so often comes from that little bit of success as well. I think if I'd done it for a few years when I first started, when I was around 14, so 10 years ago now, I was terrible. I was cannon fodder. I was going out with a poorly trained dog, and I was really bad. And then I was lucky enough when I first left school. I bought a little bit, so it was going a few nurse trials, got a few tickets, got furs and fits, and a few months later won one, and that was it. You get that little bit of buzz, that little bit of it keeps you there. So So basically, dog running stops us from tying a belt around our arm. That's long short of it. So just a little bit of a buzz.
And you mentioned before that you grew up on the family farm. So a couple of questions here. You obviously been around dogs a long time, but when it comes to trialing, who inspired you both?
For me, it was two people that I knew because they were very good friends of my parents, because my parents run dogs and still do. One was Julie Hill, who's a best friend of my mother. She's still the only woman to win the Supreme, so she's an inspiration in her own right. She's also one of the few trainers that I've come across that can work with the hardest, toughest dog, and then in the space of half an hour, switch down to the most sensitive, softest dog. So for me, she was a real inspiration. And then someone called J.R. Thomas, who was brutally honest to the point where you wouldn't really ask a question if you knew him. But he was a tremendous handler, and he came from a horse background, so he was just tremendous at reading.
Oh,
Yes,
right. Oh, you're quite
so,
way back. Okay.
Yeah. So
J.R. Thomas.
J.R. Thomas, that he was in trotting horses before he was shepherding, and then got shepherding, and then as it happens with shepherds, often they then find a passion for the dogs because they're so so needed. And he was a very good friend of my father's, so I knew him a lot as a child. And like I said, his honesty was brutal, and he was renowned for it. So I found him a great teacher, but also because he worked with horses and then dogs, he could read animals incredibly well. So he was quite inspirational for me in the dog running world, anyway.
And for me, probably because this area of Lancashire that we're in is quite a hotbed for sheepdog trial enthusiasts, and you've got the Longtons, who you've probably heard of, and then there was the Gorse and the Huddlestons, and there's it's quite a condensed area of dog trial people. But my father's uncle, my great uncle, was a man called Harry Huddleston, and he won the English National in '72 with a dog called Udale Sim, and then he was reserve supreme that year. And he actually sold Sim a year or two later to out to New Zealand. He died on the way out. He died at Singapore. Just how it happened. So anyway, he was influential when I was young in certain little things. He'd say things, but really the person who set me off on it would be my dad, really.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And why is there such a condensed area of dog trialers around you? Why do you think that is?
Well, I think for a few reasons. Mainly the sheep numbers. There's a lot of sheep around here. There's a lot of sheep farms around here. There is quite back when sheepdog trials started, it must have been somewhere where some people started. If you live in a place where there is a lot of trials and you have accessibility to go to them. But yeah, I'd say sheep numbers, number of handling things, but it's still the same. It's been the same. I mean, if you look back in the old magazines, if you're sad enough like me to look back in the old magazines from the 70s and things, the people were winning a lot from this area as well. And I mean this area as in, within 10 miles, that close an area. And regularly, you see, we've got, like, if you go an hour south of here, you've got Jim Cropper, and you've got, who was like very famous, you've got the Longtons. And then even now, if you look at the English team, regularly is made up from a large majority of people within an hour of here anyway.
Yeah, wow. And
just like that.
You're right. Okay. No, I was gonna say leading from the front, right? Like from the forefront. Like, it's really cool to have, and that could only, I suppose, a lot of these people are your mates as well. But it gets pretty competitive, and you're only going to get better by having mates that you're competitive with, right?
Yeah,
definitely. And we have, not necessarily in this area, but we have a group of friends who are all based around sheepdog trials.
Yeah.
So we've got in that sort of, in our age range and our friendship group, there are numerous people who are very good with the dogs, and it drives you on quite a lot. So there's people like, Michael Longton, who's one of the next door neighbours farm. He won the national in 2004, I think it was. So I actually went to school with Michael, just so happened, went to school, and Michael's won the national. We're in the same class at secondary school. So he's been one of my best friends for years, to be honest. You know what I mean? It's just someone who, and there's people like James Reserve national champion 2-3 years ago. He's from a little bit further, a close friend of ours, isn't he? And then obviously there was a lad, Sergio Perello, who came and lived with us for 2-3 years as well, who won the national twice. So So we've got quite a close-knit unit of friends who basically are all into dogs, mainly because we are very boring and all we talk about is dogs. So we only have friends who talk about dogs because people come in and people might come in and start talking about, you know, house prices or inflation or the latest computer game, and we'll go, oh yeah.
So do you guys catch up often and train dogs with those people, or just catch up at trials?
Certainly catch up quite regularly with them, you know, WhatsApp groups and talking with them, you know, most days.
We have, especially before big trials, we have like training like nights.
Yeah.
So we'll get together and before like the nursery season, which is where we run our baby dogs, if you like, we'll get together and practice going to different farms locally. So they get away from home and different sheep, and that usually involves barbecues and beer, and so it's a social thing as well as a training thing. But predominantly we probably see them at trials because there are so many trials. Like next week we've got 3 in a week and then 4 on the weekend. So
we've got a busy
week, so we're seeing them all the time as well.
Yeah, wow.
So in your interaction with your neighbours, your friends and whatnot, have you noticed a change in the way people handle livestock and their dogs over, say, the last decade or two?
I mean, dog handling's definitely changed, isn't it? I think.
I don't know if it has in the last decade. I mean, so I've been doing it long enough now to be able to think back. You know, I've been doing it like 20 years. You know, a good 20 over 20 years. I started when I was 4, obviously. But you know, and I think what regularly happens is certain handlers do very well, and then other handlers try to replicate that. Yeah. So back when I first started properly going to many open trials, Jim Cropper had his Sid dog and he was winning. I would say Jim would be winning one in every 2 or 3 trials. He was winning that regularly. And he had his way of running his dog. And in this area, within the northwest of England, if not the north, many handlers tried to replicate that because it was successful. Now, obviously, we've got Kevin Evans is, you know, the most successful handler at the moment. Many people try and copy Kevin. So I do see changes in handling and the way people run the dogs, and also the types of dog change a little bit as well. As you know, you get a few successful, well-used stud dogs, and a lot of dogs sort of run similar. So the handling has to sort of shadow that. I mean, it's funny. There's always been this question about, it's not like it used to be. It's not like it used to be in the old days. And if you look at the old videos of some trials, you know, maybe the dogs did get away with more roughness and things, and people are very professional now. And people say that because the sheep aren't shepherded the same now, you know, you need a lighter type of dog to keep off them and things, which I think is true up to an extent. However, we still have plenty of trials where the sheep are good, the sheep are heavy. And there's still plenty who are doing the work during the week, which means we want a dog which has the force still. And what is interesting is, so when I was first getting into dogs, which was when I was, you know, 10 years old or so. Like I said, my dad was very much into it when he was young, and he had lots of the old magazines, not the dogging ones, but the other magazines. And they had they were called the Scottish Sheepdog Handler, and this from like the 70s, the early 70s, the late 60s. And it was just a little paper pamphlet put together every couple of months, and it had the results from the trials, and it had, you know, little articles on what people were thinking. And the interest to go back then and read what they said, and they were all saying the dogs aren't what they used to be. The dogs are too weak. There really could be articles written now, but by a slightly different name with a different date heading. Because so have dogs got worse? Have handlers got worse? I'm not really sure. I think that dogs are quite regularly, like people say that dogs are getting weaker and there aren't the work dogs out there, and I appreciate that. However, I think a lot of that comes through training. I think quite regularly now, many people are training just for trials, and they're training with the idea of walking 3, 4, 5 sheep around the trial course, which is generally, because you're on such a small number, whether they're heavy sheep or not, generally the sheep are going to go. The sheep are going to be leaving the dog because they feel under pressure because there's only a small number of them. So I think a lot of trialing training for trialing is based on keeping the dog off. Stop, stay there, give room, wide flanks, everybody's on the back, wide flanks and chasing off. I think quite regularly the dog is taken out of the dog. The presence and the power is taken out of the dog in those very early stages. A lot of people train on Hebridean sheep, little sheep which run because they keep fresh. You can go out, you can train and train and train. But that's only good up to an extent, because at some point the dog needs to learn to move them. And it's like anything, it's like a natural outrun or the ability to drive. Some dogs have it and some dogs need training it. And that's the same with everything. Some dogs have natural, real power, and some dogs need to show how to do it. And I think that if you train it out of them and you tell them, no, don't walk on, no, stay off, give them room, then they're going to be taught you aren't supposed to move them. So when you do regularly, when we help put on quite a lot of nursery trials and things, and that'll let a lot of sheep out for it, and you stood at the top of the field and the little dogs come around to the top, and they've been taught, give 20 yards to the top, and they come around the top there, and the sheep don't move, and the dog goes out, and the dog goes, what now? You can genuinely see, I'm used to getting them, and these sheep just going because I trained you. And the dogs don't know what to do. Now, I'm not certain that that's necessarily the dog is worse so much as the training is. Maybe not as based on work. So getting that balance between training and work for the dog at the right moments of the training, I think is key. What do you think?
Yeah.
Did you hear her? She said,
I agreed.
Definitely.
Right. You can play that back.
Thank you. Keep it, please. Send it to my attorney.
You said something very interesting at the beginning there, Ricky, as well. You mentioned that shepherding has changed. How has shepherding changed for you guys?
Numbers.
Well, yeah, numbers, but for us probably with some of the few that maybe it hasn't, because we're all about the dogs. So we probably would use the dogs when other people wouldn't. Over here, there's a lot of, you get to people talk about quad bike farming. I know if they have like motorbike type things, something that kind of thing, but quad bikes, and that I've been to worked on farms where the dogs are barely used. They'll drive around a field with a quad bike or a van, beeping the horn, all that carry on, and then they'll get the sheep to the pen and then they'll let the dog out, which for us is bizarre. So to that extent, it's gone more that way. I think obviously I'm not that old, so I can't say what they farmed like years and years ago, but I'm aware that before quad bikes, people walked with dogs, they sent dogs further because they didn't have time to walk all the way in. So from that side of things, for me, it's definitely changed. From where I'm from in East Anglia, there's not many sheep farms. It's quite an arable place where lots of tractor work. So the farms down there don't rely on dogs as much because the terrain is easy. You can literally drive around your whole field in a quad bike. As we're up here, where you've got rough fell and hill ground, it's different. So there is a bit of a divide now. People. And
a big thing which has changed probably in the last 50 years is the numbers. If a shepherding job back in the day was 300 sheep, you had to look after 300 sheep, and you would drive them up the hill, you'd drive them to the grazing areas, you'd bring them back. Now, most shepherding jobs are 1,500 sheep at the least, really. Yeah. That's because of market prices for sheep, yes, but it's also because no one wants to do it on a shepherd's wage of £2.50 an hour. So the shepherd requires a truck, he requires a house, he wants a pension, which is understandable. He wants a proper living, but you're not going to get that off 200 sheep, are you? So someone's paying you to look after the sheep, and he's going to pay you a good wage. You're going to have to look after a lot of sheep. So the idea that shepherding has changed. So sheep at trials are often a little bit wild, generally speaking. It's not often you go and find really heavy, well-dogged sheep. But that's because they just don't get handled just as often.
Or they're running really big mobs, which understandably they're not going to behave the same way when there's four. So.
Yeah, but but you see, I'm very much of the thought that if you get wild sheep, then your dog still should be taking them. It should be, and a dog should be able to adjust. If you rock up at a trial on a Saturday morning and you're on Chiviots, which have just been got off the hill and haven't seen a dog for 3 months, your dog should know to keep off. Better be gentle. And then if you drive 20 minutes down the road to another trial, because that's how some trials are around here, and you're on some big heavy texels, your dog should know, I'm going to have to be a bit more forceful here. So they should know the difference. Right?
That's awesome. You have trials so close to each other and everything.
It's different for you guys.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
We're traveling like big kilometers down here.
Yeah. Well, I'm going 6 hours next weekend, so
1.6 kilometers to a mile too. So
Yeah.
a couple
Yeah.
But yeah, like the closest trial for us here, if we don't run one locally, is within 2 hours. And most of the trials we're doing are 4 or 5 hours, and then even regionally, like you'll have a bloke drive from the south all the way up to the north, like 6 hours for a weekend, or a lady, sorry.
It's very difficult.
Handle it. So yeah, it's
Honestly,
crazy.
we see a 2-hour drive as like whether we can be bothered to go. It's that far for us. So everything's normally within an hour, 5 minutes, half an hour. So that's crazy, isn't it? Very lucky.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and also just to touch on what you're saying there, a lot of feedback we get from the guests we have on, they think dogs have changed a lot too, to the detriment of motorbikes.
Yeah.
All the majority of mustering here used to be done on horseback, but now obviously, time is money, money is time. So people want to do things a lot quicker. So they're just buzzing around on bikes, like you mentioned, or quads or buggies now. Dogs are jumping off at gateways and they're mustering most of the paddocks. And not everyone. A lot of them are mustering the big, doing a boundary check at the same time on their vehicle, whether it be a bike or a ute or something. A ute's a utility truck, in case you guys weren't sure. And so, and a lot of people reckon that's to the detriment of the dog, just like you guys mentioned there. So
I think Meg was correct earlier though when she said we do it differently. We do it similarly in that we use bikes and things, but we're always thinking about keeping dogs fit. So as a little example here, during the lambing period, we lamb most outside, and we catch and individually tag all the lambs and have to get the sheep's number and things. So nearly every sheep is caught at lambing time outside. But my dogs don't ride on the bike, or very rarely do they. And once you've been around for a couple of days, the sheep get used to it. And the reason I do that is because by the end of lambing time, my dogs are fit. Now, if you've got a dog riding on the bike all the time, it just pops around the sheep every now and then. What often happens is you don't actually get unfit at lambing time, because it's like you catch a sheep, you lamb it, you turn around, your dog's eating the dead lamb that was left before. So they're constantly out eating stuff they shouldn't. So you can get so that's just a little example, but that's an example whereby while we are farming similar as anybody, I'm trying to look after the dog at the same time.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So is there a message you'd sort of like to get out into the industry?
Oh, what? Sorry?
A message.
A message. Ooh.
Our industry is probably very different to yours. That's the only.
So when you say the industry, do you mean the sheep industry or the dog industry or what?
What combination of the two? Like over here, I'll give you an example. Like a lot of people are still critical about the way dogs are looked after on properties. So we get a lot about animal welfare and how your dog's an important part of not just a tool but a member of your family at some degree. So some people talk about that. Some people talk about stockmanship. What's something you'd like to see change within the dog industry over in the UK? People could do better with their dogs.
That's probably a better way of wording.
Yeah, I mean, one of my don't get me wrong, we've got a lot of high horses we like to get on, haven't we? Yeah. We have got a lot of soapboxes. But one of mine is that looking after the sheep. So it's come to a stage a little bit with us where sheep are obviously there are farming and that, but there is a little bit of a hobby as well, which your sheep need to be if you care. So we breed Swaledales, and I would love to breed, as much as I'm passionate about dogs, I would love to breed a champion tup, a champion ram. That's what I would love to do.
Ours aren't just for me.
No, they're not just for me, they're for the actual quality. So it's all about, now you've opened up a kind of website. So it's about the type of hair they have and the colour, and there's loads of it, So, but what I think some people forget who are in the dog world, just in the sheepdog world, is that the reason we have these dogs is to make the sheep's life better. So the idea is that we have a dog to make our work easier. So, and that's how it all started. That's how it started 100 years ago or more, 150 years ago, was that who's got the better shepherd's dog? And the shepherd's dog was there to make the shepherd's life easier and therefore the sheep's life better. But now what we have is we have people who have sheep because they have dogs, not the other way around. So they have sheep because I've got a dog, I want to train it. Right, sheep, your job is to be chased by this dog. and that's what they do. And you'll see videos on Facebook of abuse where the puppies hanging on sheep and dogs showing power where they're just rough.
Everything.
And while I love videos which genuinely show in a work environment a dog with the real power, I love them. The one which is just for that, look at my dog, isn't it amazing? I hate that. And also at trialing as well, often people forget to look after the actual sheep, you know, and I think especially in trialing, we need to remember that because often these sheep are being lent to us by people who don't trial. So we need to be looking after their sheep.
Absolutely. Good message. Yeah, we see the same thing here as well.
Yeah. It's amazing how similar a lot of what you're saying is over here as well.
Yeah.
What's the importance to you guys of pressure relief work and low stress stock handling? And can you give us a quick rundown on the basic, or for our viewers in the industry, of what your take is on that?
As in, sort of, what is it? Well, probably you've just touched on that, actually, haven't you? As in, like, not abusing the stock and making sure that you've got the pressure right.
Yeah, pressure, keeping it low stress, the benefit of not applying a lot of stress to your stock.
Yeah, so I mean, we probably sort of, it's quite rare that you find farmers that are really, really doggy. So we're kind of in an interesting position there. You get some farmers that barely use their dogs, and when they do use their dogs, it's like rough, like just hounding sheep about from pillar to post. And then you get some farmers that don't use their dogs at all. They're like sit in a kennel, which is also bizarre. Why have them? But for us, I mean, there are times when we get stuff done and the dogs have to put pressure on sheep. But it's also for us, like we said, it's really important that they don't put pressure unnecessarily. And if we have a sheep that's really behaving badly, then by all means, if they want to go to a war with one of my dogs, they can, and they'll fight it out fine. But I don't like to see my dogs be unnecessarily rough when it's not called for. I think people underestimate the conversations between sheep and dogs when they're correct, when they're right. Sometimes there is no conversation, but there should be a few seconds where there is a conversation, and if the sheep say fine, then the dog should let it go. There shouldn't be any of this rushing in and hanging on the back leg and that kind of stuff. So for us, for me particularly, I like to see the conversation, and I like the sheep to either answer the dog, and if it doesn't answer the dog, then the dog is within its rights to insist. But then you're really fussy on how they insist. We don't like them to insist by hanging on anywhere, and especially the back end of a sheep. We don't like to see that.
I don't like.
We call that dirty.
Yeah, I don't like it. Yeah, I don't like dirty.
But if a sheep comes at a dog, I do not expect my dog to get out of the way at all. For whatever reason, if it comes at it, because even if it comes at it because it's in the wrong place, I expect if my dog's put itself there, I expect it to hold its ground. But there are situations where maybe I let my dogs be a bit rough because, like I said, we're trying to get him in a pen, or you're trying to catch something. If you've got a ewe with a lamb coming backwards, at times like that, it's a bit like we'll do whatever's necessary. We need to catch it. But we do put sheep welfare probably very highly on our list of things to worry about.
Very well answered.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about the current team you guys have there at the moment? Team of dogs.
Yeah. So we have 4 that are our top team, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we have 3 in our top team each, but we try and focus on just 2 because we find that we can't get the fitness and the training, for all 3. It requires a lot of dedication. So to have 2 each probably is our maximum amount, really. I have 2 bitches, Katie and Sophie, both of which are our bloodlines predominantly. Katie is 6, I think Sophie's 5 now. They're very different. They are trained. They do run brace, but I focus on them in singles because brace training requires a lot more to run 2 at the same time. Obviously, requires more thought process. But they're both very different. I can play to their weaknesses and strengths. They're actually chalk and cheese in many ways, but I'm very lucky to have them. Katie, for me, probably is the better trial dog, if you want to go down that route. And Sophie is a better work dog. And like I said, I can play to their strengths and weaknesses. But yeah, they're my 2.
Yeah. And so Katie is by James McLaughlin's Ben, who won the Irish National twice and was reserve supreme. And then Katie's mother is a bitch called Morag, and Morag was sister to my jock that won the Supreme. And then Sophie is a daughter of my jock, and Meg's Ember, which is a sable bitch you may have seen on the page, a little brown bitch.
She looks like a kelpie.
Yeah, and then my two are Jonah, who is he's just 3-year-old. He's a son of Sweep, my old dog, and his mother was a sister to Di Howe's Nip, a famous dog in Wales. And then my bitch is Moya, and she's a daughter of Jock again. Jock really should still be here, but he would only be 9 now. But unfortunately, he got twisted gut 2 years ago, and we found him dead in the trail one morning. He was just 7, so that was a heartbreaking time. So,
Having said
Yeah.
that, I think if I probably sold Jonah if that hadn't happened to Jock. So it gave Jonah time to.
yes, it did. Yeah. But yeah, so that's where we are, and then young dog wise, I mean, Meg mentioned that we tend to only have 2 open dogs each, unless one's coming to the end of its career, and then you have your third one.
Yeah, we try and line one up to take.
Yeah, but we're constantly bringing dogs up to that level, and then if they aren't better than what we've got, or we've got that relationship with the 2 that we've got, then we'll sell them.
Yeah.
So, like at the moment, we've probably got 4 or 5 sort of dogs, which might be nursery dogs this time. So another 3 or 4 months, we'll be ready for the nursery season, and then we'll probably sell 1 or 2 of them before the nurseries, and then hopefully run 1 or 2 of them, and then this time next year after the nurseries, sell some again. So we're constantly bringing dogs up, and I don't like to have more than 2, real fully trained dogs, because a lot of my theories on training and keeping the dogs correct are based on work, and there's only a certain amount of work I have. So if I've got 2 dogs which I'm giving quite a bit of work to, and then I've got 2 or 3 others that are coming through and they need that experience, you end up with someone getting left at home, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
I had a really good dog last year called Joe, who at this time last year I wasn't sure if Joe or Jonah was going to make it with me, and then I ran him through the summer and chose Jonah, and I was really thinking about keeping Joe because he wasn't my bloodline and he was breeding quite nicely. But it just was ending up that one wasn't getting out as much. One wasn't being taken, or and I fancied making a few quid, so I sold him. So so that was.
Also, when they reach that peak in their career, they need to keep going. So it is hard to find time for that many dogs that are at their peak in their career.
Yeah, and it is very much about the work for our theory of how to keep dogs correct. It's not like we go out with, like, those 4 dogs we've just mentioned. We don't go out into a training field and train them. It's not, not now. Once they're trained, once you're doing well with them, occasionally maybe before the national, something you might go out and do a little bit of shedding, just make sure that they're absolutely bang on point, or maybe if a problem develops at like stopping short in the outrun or something, you might just pop back into the training field, just have a work at that. But week in, week out, they don't go in the training field, they just go to work. So yeah, that's why we're never overdogged with old dogs. Yeah.
So there's a question here from Daniel Lenzo. When preparing for a big trial like the International that has a double gather, can a dog be trained for the look back and double gather in a small area, or do you need to replicate the same outrun distances and amount of sheep as the International trial?
So you can train certainly in a smaller area. I mean, like the International that Jock won, it's probably 1,000 yards the first outrun. It was massive, and while on our fell ground, yeah, occasionally they do go that far. It's not something that I have ready access. People do, but when you're training, certainly if we're talking about the look back, when a dog looks back, when you're training a double gather and the dog's turning back and going, you want to be teaching the dog to go with real scope, and they're going and they're going to go as far as it takes, whether that's 200 meters, 2,000 meters, it doesn't matter. The dog should be going. Now, everything we train is all trained at hand. It's all trained at small distances. You get it correct at a small distance, and then it's correct at a big difference. So I always say that if you train a dog, and this is for anything a dog does, if you train a dog something that isn't quite right at hand, and by at hand, I mean, let's say within 100 yards or so, if it isn't quite right, if there's something there and you're thinking, oh, it's near enough, and you're hoping that it is, Well, you times that by distance and it gets worse. You know what? You have a fault at hand, it gets worse at distance. And that's the same if it's perfect at hand, it's perfect at distance. They don't take the piss. They don't do things, they don't try and
No, that's all good.
No, that's okay.
They don't try to push boundaries. So but if you have a little problem in a dog at short distance, then it tends to get worse at big distance. And that's the same with the look back. And I appreciate that if you've only got a small 100 by 100 paddock, yes, to teaching a turn back is going to be tricky because they'll turn around and they'll see them. It's as much about going when they can't see them and they don't know where they're going. It's about having that attitude for going to find stock because you've redirected. So we've got a little piece just out here. I don't know how close this is. About 20 acres, something like that. But it's a very rocky, hilly field that's really, really undulating. And when you're on it, you can't see more than 20 yards at once. And the dogs have got to, if you turn dog back, they might only be 60 metres away, but they won't be able to see them until they get on them. So that's a great place, a great to teach them to turn back and go because they don't know where they are. And whereas you could go on a lovely, big, clean field and you turn your dog back 200 yards, but they can see you. That's not actually teaching them any better than the one where the dog's turn around and they're going because you've told them, and because they go, oh, you've told me there's something there, rather than I'm going, oh, there they are. Because when I teach turn back, some people teach the dog to turn and look and sort of stand there looking for the sheep and then go. I don't teach that because often they're going without. So there's no point in the dog turning around and looking because I want them to turn around blind and go because I've told them to. Go, you told me to sleep out there, I'm going. I'm not going to turn around, look, make the decision I'm going to go. Yeah, exactly.
You see those, they're like, no.
Yeah. And they sort of turn around and then you give them a command and they come back onto the first packet. I hate that. I want the dog, when I've taught it, to go, look back, go, and he goes, up, go, bang, gone. Yeah. Because you've taught me. You've told me there's some sheep there. I believe there's some sheep there. I'm going. I'm not turning around and starting a negotiation about am I going to go or not. I'm going because you told me to. So anyway, that's what I'd say about that.
I think also talking about the question. I wasn't always aware until I started to run off on my parent and training with them. You have to really train for these events. There's a lot of people that think that can do all the work it needs, and that's true. But then if you don't prepare your dog in some way, you may well fail. The chances are that you are likely to fail. So it's all well and good saying, well, my dog knows how to shed. But unless you prepare and continue to remind your dog how to do it properly, and like you said, sometimes they all of a sudden they just start doing something weird. So whilst yes, you can teach your dog to look back in a small area, and yes, you can maybe teach your dog to do 2 double lifts on 2 groups of 5 sheep and all that kind of stuff. If you want to go to a double lift and succeed, really, you need to know what your dog is going to do. So if you can't train in that environment, or you haven't trained at home, or you're just going to wing it, as some people do, you can't be surprised if it doesn't really go to plan, I think.
Yeah. And the preparation for the suit, when we're talking about the international, we're talking about that supreme course, the big course where the preparation for that starts very early. Like I've got a young dog here called Jim, who I quite like a lot. He'll be a nursery dog this time. He's being prepared for international courses now. He's been taught a turn back now, and he's only 18 months old.
Yeah, I think.
And he's been taught it so as it's natural to him when it does happen. I'm not just with this dog. I'm certainly hoping I'll go out in nurseries and have some fun in the nurseries. But the nurseries are only a stepping stone up to go to some opens, and they're a stepping stone to the national, which is a stepping stone to, and it's all every dog I take out, and it's been the same since I first started training dogs. It's about winning the international, and I've only done it once, and I want to do it again. And when I did it, that was the culmination of everything I've done with dogs. Every time I take a young dog out, it's in the back of my mind, I want an international dog. That's what it's about. Growing up, which I did do supposedly, my dad had these magazines that I've told you about, and they often had the picture of the shield, the picture of the Supreme Shield. And I used to look at that picture, go, wow, can you imagine winning it? How can I win it? I went to bed at night, when I woke up in the morning, came in my head very quickly. How do you do it? What we're going to do? Will this dog do it? And that's how much of a passion it was. It wasn't some slight whim. It was like a slight obsession. So when I did win it, it blew my mind for for months, to be honest. And it's 4 years ago now, so I'm getting that hunger again. But every time you take a dog out, every time I take a young dog out, I'm wanting to see the development, thinking about that. I'm not going to say every time I take 6 months about, oh no, it's not going to do this, so I can't win international. However, the basis of what I'm training from that very early age comes down to doing it on those big courses. And that's when you say, can you train dog for the international, you know, on little places? I'm sure you can, but you have to be pretty damn dedicated. You know, you don't do this. It's quite funny when you go to the national and you get in the team and you stand there for the team photo and you'll hear people saying, oh, we're going to have to start practicing some double gathers. And you think, too late, 6 weeks. You know, your dog should be able to do it, you know, 6 months ago, not. I read an article with Gwyn Penmacno, who was a tremendous handler, and he sort of talked about his year with his dogs, and he mentioned like, oh, in May I might start going and doing a couple of big turn backs in May. So, you know, he's preparing 6 months before, you know, so. And if you look at Kevin's, you know, a great example, and Kevin Evans, and Allard Owen, their dogs are prepared. You know, they don't go out there wondering, oh, will it do this? Will it do that? They know what might happen, and they know how to address it when it does happen. One thing I will say, and it's a little thing I say on clinics, is hope is a terrible emotion when you're dog trialing. Do not hope. If you're hoping, it's not going to happen. Be proactive and be ready. So it's, you know, when you go out and train for big events and things, you're not just going out and training so it goes well. You're going out so as if it goes badly, you can address it and you can change it. You know, there's no point going out there and going, oh, look at that, my dog's gone 800 yards, perfect, he can do it international. You want to go out there and go, my dog hasn't gone 800 yards, but I've blown it 3 times and he's got there. You know, that's the real preparation. It's knowing how to get out of a little hole, or your dog having it trained in there and experience in there. So when it does start going wrong or something happens, it knows, you know what to do, and it knows what you mean when you tell it what to do.
Yeah, I was brought up with men that I grew up with horses, and one thing this bloke always said to us was the ribbons were won at home and you go to the show to collect them. And I think you virtually just said that in a different way.
Yeah. I mean, that is pretty true. I mean, one of the best trial other than the national is there is Deer Play. I don't know if you've heard of Deer Play Hill Trial, but it's a big old course, and I've won that 5 times. I've won it the last 4 years in a row. But the reason I've won it is because I know exactly how to win it, and my dogs know that type of terrain, and it is pretty much that. I've not gone and got lucky 4 times. I've gone with a dog that can do it. And not got and I'll be honest with you, when you go to the post at these big trials, you've got that nerves because it's a big event, but those nerves are there not because, oh shit, what might happen? They're there because, oh good, I know what might happen.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the feeling you want to have.
Yeah. I think you hit the nerves on the head there. It's
Yeah.
We've spoken a bit about your dog. Do you have a style or a type of dog that you prefer?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and all our 4 dogs that we have now, and then if we add into that mix, Jock, who unfortunately died, Sweep, who's Jock's father, and Sweep's in the breed of all our breed. And then Wendell, that, and a few dogs. The dogs we like are dogs which hold themselves stylish, but yet they hold themselves stylish because they're concentrating, because they're wanting to feel the sheep. Some dogs hold themselves stylish because it's kind of like, oh, this is how I stand, with my head down, my tail down. But they don't actually have that bit of thing in the head, which makes them. Sergio, that's our Spanish friend, this sort of conversation we're having now, we would have 3 times a week. You know, we were incredibly boring. But Sergio said something, and he's totally right. He says dogs have to be able to play the piano. They've got to have hands. A dog should be able to go from there, like that. You know, feeling the sheep, moving down here, moving a full octave, moving a little semitone or 2. Some dogs have fists, and they walk forward, or they go forward, and they don't have that little bit in between. And we like dogs which have that bit in between. Feel, you know, as they walk toward. When a dog walks towards sheep, it shouldn't just go, you told me to walk on, therefore I will walk on. And just walk on with no feel, no brain. They should go, he's told me to walk on, but I better take 1 step. Yeah, and then another. And then you're going to move. So I want to see that. I want to see that little bit of feel. And then the big thing I want is a dog which has that face to a sheep. You know, if a sheep turns on it and wants to have a go, it goes, "You're not going to get past me." You know what I mean? And but also I don't like dirt. I don't like cheap shots. A dog really should never bite wool. It should only bite hair. And so if a sheep has a go at it, it should bite hair. But what would you, is that covered? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the one thing like I'm really big on is I like heart and courage. I appreciate there's some things that dogs struggle with or it doesn't come natural to them. You know, like I said, my two are very different, and they definitely have strengths and weaknesses, and I can play on both and maneuver them to achieve. But if they haven't got heart and that real desire that when it's really going badly, they get stuck in and they try for me, I don't really care what they look like or what they do. If they haven't got that, then for me it's no go.
I'm just glad I've got heart. That's all.
Heart and the looks, I'm guessing she's thinking.
And appearance-wise, I was going to say appearance-wise. I don't mind. Both of mine are very similar. You know, we do like I like the smooth coat more than the rough coat. I quite like pricky or nice ears. But like I said, to be honest, if I've got a bond with a dog and it does what I want and it's got that real heart and it tries for me, it could look like a poodle, really, for all I care. You know, the ability and temperament is.
Yeah, what Meg says about heart is 1,000%. You know, I mean, I talk about power a lot and things like that, but I would rather have a dog which is a little bit weak, but had a big heart and tried, than a dog that had all the power in the world, but occasionally just couldn't be asked. You know what I mean? I hate that. As a friend of mine had a dog and he called it a union dog. He said, "Oh yeah, it'd work most days, but every now and then the union pulled him." And that's not a dog I can't stand. You know, I want my dog genuinely. I want the type of dog that if I kept working on a hot day would die.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want it to die, but I mean the one that just won't quit, will keep going, and that's absolutely You can see a lot in dogs' eyes. You can see a lot of honest. I want an honest dog. If a dog's got a fault, it doesn't bother me as long as it does it next to me. I hate dogs that do a dirty bit 100 yards away and then they get near you and they're perfect. And it's like they've got that little sly look. I don't like dishonesty in any walk of life, and especially in dogs.
And do you think that is genetic, or can you get some of that out with training?
I think the heart is genetic.
Yeah, I think the heart is genetic, and to some extent the nature as well.
Yeah.
I think some things in the nature can be made better or worse. You know, like particularly if you've got a shy line and it never leaves a kennel for 2 years, and then you wonder why it's afraid of people. I think that can be, managed. But I think things like real lack of heart, lack of courage, I think whether it's genetic or whether it's just they're made that way, I'm not sure. I think you can only do so much, because I think really when push comes to shove, they are what they are. You know, they can't step up and they can't overcome, a massive fear of something. Or so nature versus nurture, and we talk about that a lot as well.
Yeah.
It's not an exact science, is it? It's difficult to know. But definitely for me, I think I certainly wouldn't be wanting to breed off a dog that didn't have any heart, put it that way. It wouldn't even be there.
The problem when you've got dogs which by nature we mean, don't necessarily mean that they bite somebody. I mean more their aptitude to us, and their ability to be trained, and the heart is the big one we come back to, courage and everything else. So we talk about, when we talk about nature, we talk about the actual thing which is in the dog. If that's not quite right and it isn't a real trier, it'll show it when it's working. It'll show it at some point, and they tend to show it at them big trials. You know that bit where I'm saying, you go to the post and you know what you're going to get. Those ones that heart and the nature isn't right, do that thing that you're not expecting, because they just don't have that real, I had a dog, I'll not mention who it was because I sold it to someone who did quite well with it, but I had a dog which had all the power in the world. Genuinely, he was quite free-eyed, and he used to walk up to stuff, and if sheep ran at him, clean as a whistle, he'd bite him on the nose. He was really good that way. He also had a tremendous outrun, all that sort of stuff. But if he didn't want to, he wouldn't. I remember one day I decided to sell him. It was when I was way shepherding, and I put him up quite a big piece, and there was some sheep in some rough ground, and we'd seen them. But you knew they were there somewhere, and you kind of put your dog there, don't you, and then hope he sort of turns up with him. And I remember I gave him a turn back whistle, turn out whistle, he took it, and I gave him another one, he took it. I gave him another one, and he came in, and he sort of turned around, looked at me, and had his big ears, and he sort of looked downfield at me, and I gave him another one, he sort of went, looked up the field a bit, and then back down at me, and I was like, what? And I was like, I hated it, because he didn't want it. and it was the same with sheep. They'd run at him twice or 3 times, and he'd dab and dab, and then the 4th time he'd go, oh, I can't do it. You know, and it just that little bit of that bit of, oh, I don't want it. And you're like, yes, you can, because you've just bloody done it, but you didn't want it. And it was, and a lot of people, I had 2 dogs at a time, and it surprised a lot of people. This is quite a few years ago. It surprised quite a lot of people that I kept the other one, because the other one had more sort of problems, but his heart was tremendous, and he ended up being he was Wendell Roy, who was Sweep's father, who did really well. But yeah, that little bit of I don't want to give you that. And you know what it's like, if forget trials, if you've been working your dog and it's hot and you're getting in towards the pens and the dogs are tired and the sheep are getting close, and then you get a land break back, that's when you're saying to the dog, now you're tired, now you've done it all, and then you've got a land breaking back, go and get it. You're going to have to go faster than you've gone. And the dog that doesn't want to go, well, the dog that runs after him and does an easy bite, oh, get the gun.
All over it. And mate, do you guys have, or who are the most influential dogs for both of you to get you to where you are today? Like, who did you learn the most from, or who really helped you get to where you stand today?
I was very fortunate. I grew up, with some really good, solid work dogs. Dogs that probably gave me a passion for work dogs more than trialing in a way. Like my mum had a great dog who was impossible to train, and she stuck at it. And then as a work dog, it was tremendous. Like we have a thing over here called like fly stripe, which is like maggots. I presume you get it over there. I don't know not much about Australian sheep farming. And he would, you'd be walking through sheep and he would lock on to one that had maggots. He knew the smell. He knew it was that type of dog that's capable of that type of thing. For me, really inspired me. So I'm very much about the work dog, and I like to see my dogs achieve at work just as much as I do on the trial field, really. But I mean, talk about great dogs. We just talked about it before here. A bitch called Becca, James Biggie's Becca. I really, really liked her, really rated her. But it's very difficult to know, because you don't know those dogs as well as your own. It's very difficult to be inspired by the dog versus a handler. We get that all the time here. How much is a dog and how much is a handler? But I think it's out of my own dogs, I'm not sure really. They've all had, I'd say the ones that I've kept indefinitely, the ones that I've never parted with, they probably all had some impact on me one way or another. In that I'm very lucky. The one that probably really taught me a lot about dogs in general was a bitch called Gypsy. I think she was about my 4th or 5th dog. She had no confidence as a young dog. Would not look at sheep in the face. So she'd near enough turn around and reverse. She and me in my ignorance, I was only a teenager. I hated her. I wanted to sell her. There was no power. She looked weak as anything. And then my main bitch got injured at lambing time, and I had to take Gypsy. And she just changed, like unbelievably so. All those faults that she had through work experience, they just came right. And from then on, we hit it off, and we were joined at the hip after that. We were inseparable. So she probably taught me the most. So for me, I think that dog in itself taught me the most about not to quit on a dog that's young. Like, they display these faults when they're young, but they can develop and change. And again, through training and through experience, you can fix things that you didn't realise you can fix. So I think for me, she was probably my most important dog.
My most important. It's difficult to put a finger on it. I've been incredibly lucky with what I've had. The old Wendell Roy that we were talking about just a moment ago. So because he's the father of our line, yeah, he taught me a lot about dogs' ability to hold balance, because he was not a flanker. He never flanked once in his life, but he would win on light sheep, he would win on heavy sheep, because he knew where to be. He was in the right place. And his son Sweep is probably one of the most famous dogs England's ever produced. Now he's still alive now. He's 14 and a half, and he's deaf and blind, and he's an absolute gentleman. And he would win as much as any dog has ever been. And then I had Jockey's son, who won the Supreme and the National. I've been very lucky, but you could probably trace it back really to Wendell Roy, because he changed me as a handler. He changed me and opened my eyes to letting a dog work, letting a dog hold balance, even on light sheep. But yeah, I mean, I could wax lyrical about how lucky I've been with them and what they've won. I mean, yeah, what they've won is part of the story. but just who they were as men. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think I think it's easy to take them for granted when you get good ones as well. But when I lost Jock, I was heartbroken for over a year anyway, and it's not even 2 years now, and I mean that genuinely heartbroken. It made me wonder how people ever lose a child and get over it, because it was, and obviously I love my children far more than my dogs, but it hurt me that much. It made you wonder. Yeah. So the thing is, like, they become part of you when you're working with them all the time. These special dogs, the ones that you keep forever, and those dogs that took me to where they did, they do become part of you. And I could, like, when Jock died, I said to someone, I could have opinions on other people's dogs, because they'd say, and yeah, I mean negative opinions. And if they said, yeah, well, how come you have that opinion? And I could go, because of this, because this is how it should be done. That's how he was like my DNA of dog running. His father, Sweep, Anthony, because his power was genuine. Sweep and Jock, they never got disqualified at a trial, and they never got stuck at a trial, because they had the absolute genuine power where they could move sheep, but they also won loads. So they were exactly what I would have been hoping to get, and then he got cut short at 7. So I could talk about them and stuff they did at home and stuff, but it's with the trial, and you can actually put a title to what they've done, can't you? At home, it's hard to sort of say, best caught sheep and a lambing field 2017 or something, it doesn't quite work. You can sort of say what they did at a trial. So, but yeah, we've been very lucky, and we're lucky with these 4 we've got now. They're just the same stamp, the same. Like Meg says, her dogs are very different. They are, but the actual basis of the dog, the fundamental points are the same. Yes, the flanks are different and the bits and pieces. The actual fundamentals of what a dog should be is exactly the same, and they all come back from Jock, Sweep, and then Wendell right ahead of them.
You guys are very deep and into it with your dogs, eh? I can feel the passion.
You're scratching the surface, mate. You're scratching the surface, that's all. Seriously, it's sad. It's sad. It really is.
It's been an hour, and I reckon I could sit here for another 6. There's another question.
I don't know if you guys did, but I wrote a poem about Sweep. I don't know if you ever saw that poem that I wrote about Sweep. But that
I haven't.
Okay, well, if you look on Little Dale Sheepdogs, I mean, we haven't shared. It's 2 years ago since I wrote it. That shows what I think about. I've never ever done one before, and it was just something that I did one day about him, and that, yeah, just have a look at that, and that tells you what I think about.
You'll have to share that for us.
You send it, Meg.
Yeah, definitely. Another question.
That's sweet,
yeah. Another question here from Daniel Lenzo. If a dog has a slight weakness in one particular area, can it be detrimental to focus a lot more on that area of weakness?
That's a good question.
I think it depends on the weakness is as well.
It does. I think when you've got a dog, certainly this is what we're like anyway. If you've got a dog and you like it, again, I'm talking about that fundamental thing, that thing about a dog. When you take it out, you enjoy it, and you like the dog, but it has a fault. Well, that's for you to try and make it better, but try and concentrate on the good things. Because if you like the dog, you're halfway there. I've had loads of dogs which have had loads of talent, but I don't like them. There's certain things that they can't do. I can't abide. Whether it's like, actually, Wendell was a good example, isn't it? I'll talk about Wendell again. For 1 year, he couldn't do a proper outrun. He got one open place in a year, and he stopped on his outrun all the time. And I don't just mean a little bit. I mean, he was peeping from 20 yards away. It was embarrassing, and people were laughing about him. It was terrible. It was awful, shocking. And then we worked at him. But when he got there, he was lovely, and I loved his passion, and I loved his style and his power and everything. Like, I proper loved the dog. And yes, he had a terrible outrun, and I never fixed it 100%, but I got it a lot better. I got it really right. And he went out and he ended up winning 30 Opens and got the English team twice, and he won the international brace twice. And that was because if I'd focused on the outrun and just let it get to me too much, like everybody else was doing, then I would have sold him. But I didn't because I loved what he was. I loved the other bits. You know, like a top trump. Do you remember top trumps, the cards? I don't know if you ever have that in Australia. You know, where you have like a list of. Do you know what I'm on about? Okay, it's like a pack of cards, and let's say it's a top trumps on sports cards. So you all have a different sports. It's got little categories, and you have a game where you say, number of seats 6. You've got number of seats 5, and you have to give me your card. It's still a little kids game. If you do that about dogs, and you add up the little bits, and you say like power 8 out of 10, outrun with Roy 2 out of 10. But you know, with Roy, he was 10 out of 10 for some bits, but he was 2 out of 10 for some. So a lot of people have gone, I'd rather have a 6 out of 10 of everything. Well, I didn't want a 6 out of 10 for everything. I wanted something that the things that I care about, he was 10 out of 10 on. Does that make sense? So I stuck him, I kept him, because he had a massive fault, and it was a terrible fault, and people genuinely used to laugh at me for keeping him. And I did question it regularly, but he was what I wanted. He was what he showed, you know, like I say, he's changed my whole thesis on dog running because of what he was in certain categories. So I would rather have something you're saying about if they've got a problem. I would rather have something which on if you split it into 5 categories was brilliant at 4 of the ones, and the one who wasn't so good at didn't bother me too much. I'd stick at it, you know, because I'd rather have that than one that was 7 out of 10 on everything, but it was only 7 out of 10 on something that I really wanted to be good.
No, absolutely makes sense.
Talking about it, you know, that we're focusing on a weakness makes it worse. I think time is really important. You know, there are certain things like gripping's an easy one because we all come across that in training. You know, if you go to town on that dog that grips when it's 6 months old, you might end up with nothing left. As well, if you just sort of bide your time and you're careful about how you take it, how often you take it, and what you do, and then you put it right at 15 months, for instance, or you really go to town on it, then fixing the problem, and then you still have a dog at the end of it. So I think, yes, you need to focus on those weaknesses, but you need to pick your time in and how you go about trying to fix them really well. I think a lot can be managed differently anyway, I think, when you're training.
While you just touched on that there with that fault, we've got a question here from Wayne McMillan. How do you guys teach your dogs to give ground or keep out on their sides and the outrun?
This is one for you. We got
what I like to see, you know, I would rather a dog's a bit tight when it's young. I would rather it is too tight, you know, because a dog that's tight tends to want to be on its sheep, and the reason it wants to be on its sheep is because it's drawn towards them, which means it tends to be a lying dog, roughly speaking. And it's a really easy to simplify it. But dogs roughly fall into 2 categories. They're either a flanker natural outrunner, or they're a lying dog, which isn't a natural outrunner. I mean, that is generalisation, but within reason. And the type I like are the lying dog. Someone's got sick of us.
Hello.
So I like a dog which is too tight in its outrun. But what I want to teach a dog to do is to be fair, this is like, it'd be quite a long answer, this. So yeah, we try to teach a dog to look at the fundamental comes down to seeing its sheep and knowing it's not allowed to walk on and do what it wants to do until it's got to the place where we want it to be and got there correctly. So while a lot of people will stand in the middle of the field with a pipe and go, you will run around the outside of the field stuff, that isn't really our way. It's more about doing it in absolute bit parts all the way to the sheep, going, you must give a bit of ground, stop because you're tight, you must give a bit of, and try to get that shape rather than that shape. And a big thing, a huge thing to watch when you teach the dog his outrun is watch the dog's head. If a dog's looking at its sheep on an outrun, it's probably going wrong. When a dog outruns, so yeah, if the camera is the sheep and I'm a dog on its outrun, then it should run, and when it looks, it should look away again until it's finished its outrun. A dog that looks at its sheep and keeps looking tends to drop its shoulder in, tends to tighten, tends to cut the thing. So a big thing to look at a dog when it's outrunning is its head. It's allowed to glance to see where they are, so it knows it's getting there. But if it glances and then keeps going, perfect. But you watch a lot of dogs, ones with too much eye or ones which are a bit tight. They tend to glance maybe once, and then they might glance again, and then the third time they glance, they go, oh, sheep. And they drop that shoulder, and they can't help themselves, and that's when they come in. So that's a question to look at, really.
No, that explains it really well. And I really like how you touched on liking your dogs tight. There's a massive thing over here where people are, they got these young dogs and they're just keeping them off all the time. And then they get to an obstacle and the dog's got no power left. It won't come in.
Yeah.
And like, oh,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Relax. Or,
Yeah. It's, you see, I believe even on light sheep, even on wild sheep, the dog should be putting them through the hurdles. And yes, we require dogs which have quite a lot of feel and balance to do that, but that is what they should be doing. It's easy to have windscreen wiper dogs which just go like this behind them, but that's not what they're here for. That's not what we want to be breeding. So, yeah, no, I would rather a dog is tight and on them and pushy. I might even get it trained still like that. When Jock was about 13 months old, he was very, very tight. He was very, very pushy. And he was quite plain, and we used to call him the Kelpie. He did genuine, and I say that in not a bad way, because one of the best dogs I've ever seen was a Kelpie. But he was very tight, and everything was a rush. And I was talking to Ian Brownlee's breeder, and he said, "How's he going on?" I said, "Oh, he's a bit tight. But his room will probably come on his own, because I've had a few dogs." He says, "Not with my breed, it won't." He says, "You'll have to push him out." So I did do. I just made sure that, and all summer I had to keep pushing him off, because when I say tight, I mean tight. But he was fully trained. By this point, I could do all my farm work with him. It was all a bit, he wanted to do it last week sort of thing. But I got the timing right to then put the room in him. And even up until he died, he could still put a tight move in. And he was just getting to that age where for trialling, he'd learned how to do trialling. So he'd won. But I'll tell you what, his best years were to come. It's easy to say that now he's 6 months, isn't it? He don't won everything. But yeah, I would definitely rather a dog, especially when it's young, be a bit on its stock and wanting to work them.
Yeah.
I'd rather when they're tight and on them, it's very easy to manipulate them out. If they're wide off them, it's very hard to manipulate them in.
And I think for us also, trialing in particular, they have to be in contact. We like them to be in contact with sheep all the way around. It's not for us. We're not just like letting the sheep run and flick the dog about. For us, the dog is taking the sheep round. So if you spend ages with these dogs that are too wide, they're not in contact. And generally speaking, if we miss gates, it'll be because for whatever reason the dog isn't in contact. If the dog is in contact, then you can hit your obstacles and your line's good. But it's through training and through the quality of the dog. It's up to the dog to decide how close it needs to be in contact, and that's why we expect them to adjust accordingly. Really,
a fundamental thing of our and it comes through the breeding of our dogs as well, is that when we're training dogs, we're not just telling dogs left. We're not just teaching them to go left and go right and walk on. We're teaching them how to work the sheep. So although we're putting command on this way, that way, the other way, we're teaching the dog to make correct decisions. I liken it to bringing up children. When the kids were young, when my two elders were younger, regularly it's no, don't do that. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. Do this, do that, do the other. So as they get older and they can take the responsibility, they make the correct decisions. And it's exactly the same with dogs. We're teaching them always to make the correct, work your sheep like this, work your sheep like this. And it's over and over and over again. I'm not just saying left because I want you to go left. I'm saying it for a reason. Go there, go to the point of balance, hold them there. So as they get older, and it doesn't come overnight, this we're talking about once the dog gets experience, you've taught it to make the correct decisions. So if it's 1,000 yards away on the hill, you can leave it. It doesn't need command because you've taught it to make the correct decisions as it's grown up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just listening to really get into that, and I can see that, and I can see the benefits in it as well.
Question here from Ian Sutherland: how do I get a young dog to drive that is a strong heading type?
A line.
Yeah, a long line.
A long line. I do quite a lot of work if we've got a flanky dog about, which isn't our real type, but on clinics and things, I like to have a long, like 50-meter line. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll just pick the line up, and rather than getting at the dog, the problem is that what happens when you've got a flanky dog and you've got a dog which is really wanting to flank and go around them, is that your natural inclination is to tell the dog off, isn't it? It's to be like, which puts pressure on them. Well, as soon as you're putting that pressure on them and you're stood behind them, you are encouraging them to go even faster around them. You know what I mean? The thing, what you get with a dog, which when you're driving, it's quite hard to put pressure on because the pressure is at the back of the dog. So all the dog wants to then do is flick out to the side so as it can keep an eye on you, because that's where you're putting that pressure straight forwards. The dog wants to get out to the side. So if you hold the line, and I mean, I use like a washing line, like a really, really long, thin washing line. Get a glove because it'll take your fingers off. So what I like to do is if I've got a dog which is flanking, I'll just pick the line up and I'll just encourage it. Now, if it starts to head them, I won't say anything. I'll just put the brakes on. Just shut my hands as it can't, and then keep it going again. And just shut my hands so it can't, and just keep doing that. So as it gets into doing. Another thing I do is a thing called flicky flanks. So flicky flanks are oh man, this is a long answer, isn't it? Right. So flicky flanks are the idea of flanking a dog both ways without stopping in between. Okay. Now flicky flanks cover quite a lot of faults in dogs, and it covers dogs which struggle. So oh God, looking at now you're getting me going. Right. So I believe that all dogs are born with a gearbox. Okay. Now a dog should have 5 gears. Okay. Now most are born with either 1, 2, and 3, or 3, 4, and 5. And the 3, 4, and 5 are the pushy ones, and they're the hard ones, and they're the ones that we take a lot of time trying to teach gears 1 and 2 to. And then you get these others which have got gear 1, 2, and 3, which are really probably more correct, easier to train, blah, 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 but they don't have 4 and 5. So we need to teach them 4 and 5. And flicky flanks teach them 4 and 5. They also teach a dog how to drive, and they give a dog confidence. Now, flicky flanks are the fundamentals of flicky flanks are the idea that you flank a dog this way and that way without moving, without stopping it. So try to do this in a quick way, it's hard. So the idea, right, so with many dogs and dogs that don't want to drive and dogs which haven't got a lot of power, I'm not saying that they're the same thing, but I'm just saying that this covers two different problems. To give them that 4th and 5th gear, rather than saying to them, you will walk on. Well, if you're saying to a weak dog, you will walk on, well, it won't, because it can't. And sometimes with weak dogs, you'll see them, they're stood there, and they're a bit, especially dogs with too much eye, they're kind of frozen, and you go, come on, get up, walk on, come on, walk on. And the dog stood there, and the people are getting mad when you walk on. And I think in the dog's head, it is walking on. It's almost like if I had a big boulder and I was pushing up a hill and you're saying, push it up the hill, I'd be going, well, bloody hell, but I can't, I'm not going anywhere, but if I wasn't doing it, I'd be back, And I think some dogs are like that. They get to that point where they're pushing all they can in their head, but they're actually stood still. So to encourage them, and often what they do is, if that's the sheep and the dog, they get to that point, that sort of that boundary they get to where they can't walk into that area because of eye or feel or fear or whatever, and they get to that point and they don't want to walk on, and the sheep are stopped and the dog stopped and we're at a stalemate, and we need to move that dog into that area. So what we do is we use flicky flanks to flank the dog into that area. So a flicky flank, it's important that we flank it one way then the other without stopping. Because if we flank it one way, it's going to stay on this line. Stop it and flank it the other way, it's probably going to stay on this line. The idea, I'm going to turn my hand that way. The idea with a flicky flank is that we'll give it a come by. It doesn't look like an away on your screen. We'll give it a come by, and then without stopping it, we'll give it an away, so it snakes. So it's actually coming closer, and then the other way, and then the other way. Do that quickly, and also you've moved it up 5 yards. That's moved the sheep, and it's away. And that dog thinks, you do it again. So rather than saying to the dog, right, we're going to make a point of you walking on, and the dog can't, we're going to walk the dog on quickly. Okay, and get the sheep, and then so same with the driving. If the dog doesn't want to drive, I'll flicky flank it rather than try to make it drive. I'll go, come back, and get the sheep going, and then stop it, and then good dog, and then let it go. So oh, that was fun. Kind of chase them away rather than, and then once they're going, then walk it on. That's when you pick your line up and you just hold it. Every time it's going to go fast, you just put the brakes on, and then loads of encouragement. Good dog. The thing about the line is that you can almost hold it back, make the dog sort of think, oh, I want to drive, and you're kind of going, no, you won't. You kind of put the brakes on. So the dog really wants to. A lot of the key to all this is the distance from the dog from the sheep, because there's an area where sheep will, this area I talked about a moment ago, where dogs will get to that bubble, and they'll happily follow that bubble. But as soon as the sheep stop and the dog has to go into that bubble, that's when we get that point where the dog doesn't want to walk on or it wants to flank round. So what we can do with the line, we can just hold it just behind that bubble. So as the sheep keep going, and we hold the dog just behind that bubble. So the dog wants to gain, it wants to get to the edge of that bubble. And then when the sheep do stop, we let it get to the edge of the bubble. And when it gets to the edge of that bubble and it doesn't want to walk in, then we do a quick little flicky flank, get him in there, sheep go again, and then we put the line up again, and we're away again. And he thinks I've got all this power. And you do that many times, and the dog starts to think, oh, I'm a good driver. You kind of kid the dog into doing it. And so we're gaining that fourth and fifth gear that it doesn't really have, but we're helping him as much as we can to get it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That movement creates movement, and then they get confident.
So.
Yeah. But it also gives you, there's a guy called Mike Wessendorf in Germany, top fella, German Mike, as I call him. It took me a long time to think of the name. And he has a little bitch called Nice. And she was exceptionally well named because she was nice. She was too nice. Lovely outrun, lovely. And it was his first dog, so she was ideal because she was easy to run. She had loads of niceness. But if the sheep stopped, she stopped. So when I first went out to Germany and met Mike, we talked about flicky flanks and we talked about being proactive. So we got her doing the flicky flank thing. So as she got there, he could flick her this way and that way. And she the other thing is that when a dog walks onto sheep with eye, the sheep often look at the dog and they kind of go, what are you going to do? It actually makes confrontation. The flicky flanks don't, because the dog kind of comes up going, and the sheep go, and they move. We've often seen plain dogs, haven't we, that we know are a bit weak, but they kind of walk in a bit like Yogi Bear, and the sheep turn and go because they just don't have that fear of them, or there's not that confrontation. Yeah. So what we did with Mike's dog, with Nice, is that we started to do flicky flanks at the top, and what he ended up doing was when he went to trial, he was proactive. If he thought these sheep were just that bit heavy, he would flicky flank at the top. Now, he'd lose a couple of points at his lift, but he got the sheep moving, and then he'd have a good run. Whereas if he hadn't flicky flanked, yes, he wouldn't have lost any points at his lift, but he wouldn't have had any points anyway, because he never got the lift. So it's very much what Meg was saying earlier about if you have got a fault, it's not finding a way. If you like everything else, surely it's for you to go, well, I like everything else, it's what I want. I've got to find a way to make it better, in the bit that is wrong.
I think the key with driving in particular, going back to that question, is 9 times out of 10 it's quite unnatural for the dog. And it's very easy to get frustrated with the dog because it's like trying to head them or it's going for its stop. And, you need to make it a positive experience because the dog's pretty uncomfortable anyway. So if you then get mad, then it just goes from bad to worse and you end up just putting the dog off wanting to even try. So I think with the line, you prevent fallout and you give it confidence. So for me, it's a win-win. Yeah. And even though sometimes I think people think it's a step back putting a line on, I kind of see it as a lack of control or a lack of the dog being in training. But I think it should be seen as a real tool at any stage, really, to be honest. We use it a lot.
Yeah. I think the interesting about using the line, I started using a line a lot when I first started doing clinics, because generally speaking, I like to use generalizations. Generally speaking, 7 or 8 times out of 10, a problem with the dog at any clinic is they can't stop it. So they'll come and they'll say, oh, it won't do this, it won't do that, it won't do the other. And it's all based on the fact they can't stop the dog. When you're training the dog, the first basics you want to train it is left, right, stop, and start. But the stop is the key one, because if you can stop a dog, and I don't mean stop in a fearful place, I mean stop in a happy place. I'm stopped because you've told me to stop, then you can do everything else. Those 4 basics are the building blocks. If you start trying to build on top of that and train other things, and these 4 aren't correct, you can't get it. But the stop on. So, like I say, on clinics, probably more than 8 out of 10. But anyway, let's say 8 times out of 10. The problem is the stop. They'll come and they'll say, "My dog won't outrun," or "My dog won't do this. My dog won't do that." And I'll say, "Right, well, they work it." And I go, let's work on the stop first. Oh, it stops well. It doesn't stop well enough. And you work on the stop for a day and you get it a bit better. And all of a sudden, that silly outrun that it was doing is going, oh, I have to do as I'm told because I have to stop. Oh, well, I better outrun properly then, I don't know. And it all falls into place because the basics come up. And so I'm jerking from one subject to another like I do. I've got sheepdog Tourette's, mate. Seriously. Just look, outrun. Anyway, and so it's, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So The stop is also the fundamental thing about the relationship we should have with the dog when it's working. We are the boss. We are the pack leader. We are the ones in charge. You stop when you're told. If you're not stopping when you're told, you are making decisions which aren't for you to take. So when this is what I'm talking about, the very basics.
Sure.
So if we can't stop a dog, it's showing that the dog is disrespecting us, or doesn't believe it has to do as it's told, or doesn't believe that we're the pack leader. So we need that stop to be correct. What often happens is on clinics, I'll go out there and they'll have a dog which does something weird, like a bit of a temper thing or a grip or something wrong. And I work on the stop and we get the stop right, and the dogs often relax. And the reason they relax is because all of us, they've been bred for 150 years to work for us. So when that stop's good, all of a sudden the dog goes, I know where I am in the pecking order. Whereas when they're kind of fighting for who's the boss, it causes issues in the dogs because they're not the boss. And that's when you get temper. That's when you get gripping. That's when you get them doing silly things. So the fundamentals of getting that stop correct so as they work forward. And then we get those basics right. Then once those basics are right, that's when we start teaching them about making the decisions correct, you know, taking responsibility. We can then give the responsibility back once we know we've got it correct. It's the same as with children. You know what I mean? I don't, you know, with Dylan now, who's 40 months old, I say to him, don't touch the fire, it's hot. Don't touch the fire, it's hot. Okay? So he learns not to touch. Now, Ashley and Dan and the elder ones, I'll say, can you go and light the fire? Do you know what I mean? Because and that's how it works, isn't it? And it's the same with dogs. We say, don't do that, do this. Don't do that, do this. And then in the end, it's not don't do that, it's just do this. And it's not even do this. They go, I know what I'm doing. You've told me to do this a million times. And it's, you know, that's the, and I'm talking about when dogs are really developed. So we have to take responsibility of them. The younger they are, the more keen they are. Things we take the responsibility in-house when we make the decisions ourselves, because we know there's a high likelihood the dog's going to make the wrong decision, or the dog makes the wrong decision. We have to stop it. We have to tell it that was wrong. Now do it like this. So the next time it does it, hopefully it goes, oh, last time I did that, I just better ease off here. Little things like coming through a gateway or going through a wet spot on the farm, and the dog comes too tight and the sheep split, and you go, what the fuck are you doing?
You're right.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And you go, what are you doing? At the moment he does it, so he goes, oh, what am I doing? And you go, oh, wait, come by, look back, put them together backwards. So you think next time it'll go, oh, last time I was a dick coming through here. So it comes down and it eases off. And the sheep goes, yeah, look at that, and it carries on. And it actually relaxes the dog because you're giving it the responsibility to do it. But you've said to it, don't do that, do this. And then it learns, hopefully, next time, do this. Obviously, on trial fields, we are taking more responsibility because the dog doesn't know where the hurdles is. Well, some do, but anyway, we're not going to that. So we are into it, but we're guiding it. But I still think that when a dog is fully trained, you know, even on a trial field, it should be making quite a lot of the decisions, because it's very hard to know at distance, for example, if the dog should take 6 inch, you know, a little bend here, a little bend there to hold the line. I want dogs which hold the line. When I put sheep on a line, I want the dog to work on that line until I correct the line, if that makes sense. So all the time we're trying to get a dog which works and holds the line for us. So as when we do go to a trial and the sheep are tricky, it thinks, oh, these are tricky, I better hold the line a bit harder. And then all it needs from me is to tell it, you're on the wrong line, go 10 yards a bit. That type of, I mean, that's hugely simplifying, but that is the kind of relationship we try to get. Certainly with Sweep at the end, he took more, I would say he made more decisions than I did at a trial. And that sounds maybe ridiculous, but I thoroughly, he probably won about 100 open trials. He won the national twice, he was reserve supreme twice, he won the qualifier at the international, he won day of play, he won everything there is to win. And he did, in the last 3 or 4 years of his life, he took at least 50% of the decisions. And ignored most of me. He told me a lot of the sweep because he taught me how to ignore things.
On that note, I'm going to say, question here from Daniel Lenzo. What's the 3 toughest trials you have competed in, and why were they so difficult?
Do you want to answer that first?
Well, for me, deer play has got to be. Deer play's got to be one of the toughest. Just because I think well, 2 reasons really. The terrain is incredibly hard at deer play. I don't know how long is the outrun?
It's about 600 yards. Yeah. It's not much. It's
more that there's a little bit of flat in the top, and then it's up, and then it's just rough, really rough. And it's difficult for the dogs to hear. It's difficult to redirect them. And then the other factor is that the sheep are actually really hard work. So when the dog gets there, you've got 3 or 4 trivets that just do not want to come down. So your dog's coming back to that heart again. You're taking all that effort to get all the way up there. And if you've got a natural outrunning dog, it's happy to be there, but it's still a long way. And then it gets there, and they're saying, "Oh, really hard to bring them down." So for me, deer players has got to be one of the toughest, I think, just for that combination, really.
So,
Bowen's got to be one of yours.
well, I would actually say this is going to sound maybe opposite. I find a little nursery course in the middle of winter with 3 hogs that have never seen a dog before, and the drive hurdle's 50 yards away. I find that really hard. I find that far harder than, so it's probably what I should say is deer play, yeah, Berwyn, which is, it's only a new track, it's been going 3 or 4 years, but it's 1,000 yards either way, and it is steep, and it is rough ground, and you can't see your dog. It is, well, let me put it this way, the day I first went, because the qualifier for that is on 3 tiny little fields in a little Welsh village, tiny fields, 150-yard outruns. And so you have to do well there, and then you go up this valley in the middle of nowhere. And we went up, I went with Sergio when I first went. And as we were driving up the road, we jokingly said, "Oh, can you see that tractor on the top? They're going to let sheep out there." Like, and they were. And I remember I got out the car, and there's a few people, and everyone was like, "What's going on?" And I got the phone and went, "What's that, Dad? The cows are out. I have to come home." Okay, because genuinely it was that sort of trial which looked tough, and it was massive, and it is really difficult. However, it's easier for me than it is for most because we've got that type of ground. So deer play is very hard, but like I said, I've won that. Well, we can't go this year, unfortunately. We're doing a demo somewhere, so I can't win it 5 in a row. But I won it 4 in a row, and I'm not blowing my trumpets in that. I've won it 4 in a row because my dogs are ready for it. So while it is tough, I find those a bit easier to win on than a little pokey course with 5 mental sheep going everywhere, where it's kind of a leveler, where everyone's at a similar kind of standard. But for actual fun of watching and fun of running on those massive courses are really good fun. My favourite course ever was where I won the Supreme, and that's probably because I won the Supreme.
That brings us to another question we have here from Marie McKillop. Why do you guys trial?
I think we're very competitive. I mean, that probably is one of the biggest
Yeah,
things.
but I'm more competitive than you.
I think when I first started out, it was just because my parents did it and I grew up with it, and it was something that for whatever reason I just always wanted to do. I remember wanting from a very early age, wanted my own dog, wanted to trial, and then like you said, when you get a bit of success, you want to do it again and again. I think for me, underlying it as well is that working with the dogs alongside, especially doing outdoor lambings and stuff, you spend really long, hard days with them in horrendous weather conditions sometimes, and you've got a really good bond. And the way I see it as well, I like to take my dog out somewhere where I know it can succeed. I quite like to show them off. They're good dogs. I like people to see them. I like people to appreciate what I appreciate in them. And I think, especially with the success I had this last year, I want to do it for them. I think those dogs deserve to have some little posh writing under their name on a pedigree. They deserve to have those achievements, because if not, they wouldn't get known and they wouldn't get seen. And I think that's really sad when you've got such a good dog. You get to step up and have the fame that others do. Really, for me, that's what I like.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's that. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge competitive, so it is. We're very competitive. Yeah, it is that I want to win. I want to be, but I think it's slightly more with me. Is that I want my dogs to look better than your dog. It's more like it. Like it would be easy to keep some of the dogs I've sold and win trials with them. It would be easy to keep them, but I wouldn't want that because they'd be winners. They'd be nice types of trial dogs, but I wouldn't want that because they weren't my type of dog. I want my type of dog to, and I don't just mean this weekend, the next weekend. I mean over the course of their career, to go down as, look at that dog. It never got stuck. It never got disqualified. It won this. It won that. It did that hard trial easy. That type of, of leaving a legacy in a way. And it's that fundamental kind of thing of what I believe a dog should be. I want that dog not just to be a work dog, because a big thing we like to say is that our dogs do the work and do the trialing. So I love it when I can put a video on Facebook of my dogs doing a load of work, and then go and win the next day against someone whose dog never does work because it's a trial dog.
Yeah.
It's that thing. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing like winning. You know, that feeling. You know, with little trials, it lasts for half an hour. Within big trials, it lasts for half a year. You know, and it's that. It gives you something. You know, it gives you a real adrenaline buzz. You know, it's something else like.
So, on that note, you said earlier something about work dogs and trial dogs. Do you think trial dog, like over here we hear a big debate that trial dogs don't make work dogs and work dogs don't make trial dogs? Yours are obviously doing both, and what is your take on those sort of comments?
I 1,000% disagree with that statement. I mean, that is the absolute, like that is what we've been talking about the whole thing. That is the fundamentals of what we believe in. So Jockey's buried on. We've got a big allotment there, and I buried him right at the top of the allotment because he could see the whole day on that. But the reason was because when, like, we had quite regularly people come to look at the dogs. You know, and you sort of say, oh yeah, drop in and we'll show you. And on there we'd have 200 or 300 ewes with lambs at foot, and I could put him around there without a command, and he would hustle them in. And every time he hit a corner, his tail would be in the air, and he'd not grip, but he'd nearly bump into the sheep, and he'd be like a right rouser. You know what I mean? You'd think, what a hound. And then we'd cross the road, and there's a little training paddock, and I'd have 5 sheep. And I'd give him one stop whistle, and he'd go, trail mode. And he'd start walking, and he'd do all that. And Sweet was the same, except Sweet wouldn't think he was cleverer than Jock. But that's what I love to do. I love to show people my dog's doing that work, doing that real, being a bit rough, being in a good way, getting the job done, but then having the ability to go, we're on this job now, and all in between. You know what I mean? So I fundamentally disagree with that. However, it maybe takes a certain type of dog to be able to do both successfully. There's plenty of dogs which do the work and do the trialing, but to do it successfully and for a long period, maybe takes a different type of dog, or a certain type of dog, which is the type we're after, which is the dogs that have the natural feel, have the natural balance. If you run a dog which is a bit plain and you do a load of rough work, you go on 4 or 5 sheep and he's a bit plain, it carries on being rough. So I like a dog which has got a little bit more eye than some people, a little bit more feel and balance, because if you drop down to them small numbers, they immediately do just drop down to that gear, don't they?
Yeah.
We hear it a lot.
We hear it a lot. We
Yeah.
hear it more from the farming community, though. So it's the farmers who are a bit like, oh, bloody trial dog type mentality, who are the ones who I like to talk to and say, come and look at ours. Just come and look. No, not. I'm not selling anything. Just come and look.
Yeah.
And when they do, generally speaking, they go in with a pup.
Well, the ironic thing is, generally are very bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet they criticise ours, because they trial. So it's
And I think also as well, I think on some of these places where they've got a farm dog and it's a rough ass, the sheep learn the dog's a rough ass and they can get away with more. Like when we have trials here, generally speaking, the sheep are good because they expect the dog to be good. You know what I mean? They don't try and take it. Where you go some places and the sheep go, let's go and jump that wall because the dog won't, that type of thing. And so I think that makes probably a difference as well.
While we're talking,
I'm just going to have to go have an outrun in the toilet.
That's all right.
Actually, well, we got you there, Meg. When we're talking about your dogs, when you guys are considering future joinings, what are you thinking about?
For breeding?
Yes.
Yeah. It's breeding is something that we're quite passionate about. Obviously, because we've got stud lines, we've got our own line, but obviously, because our dogs are related, we have to look for stud dogs elsewhere. And it's tricky because I often find that some people aren't particularly honest about their dogs. I'm happy to tell people my dog's faults all day long because they all have them. But sometimes if you say to someone, they might be a bit offended. I really like your dog, but can you just tell me what you think he could be better at? And they don't like it. They're like, oh no, he's perfect. He's this, he's that. So it's hard to find a dog that you like, that you don't know, but you want to use him. If you don't know him inside out, and the handler isn't particularly honest, you can end up with a big fault in your line. But that being said, we try, even though breeding isn't an exact science, we try and pick a dog that we like, talking about the heart, the courage. We try and find that in another dog that we think will match our line. And then if we've got a dog that's particularly like a wide outrunner, for instance, we probably wouldn't then pick him for being a wide outrunner. But in our experience, it's not as easy as putting one fault to a strength, and that the puppies that come from that cross automatically just meet in the middle. That doesn't really happen, with puppies that are really good outrunners, and then some that aren't. So we just try and pick dogs that we really like. We like the core of them. We're quite big on genetics, on picking genetic lines that we know cross with genetic lines. For instance, if you have a dog that, particularly in my older bitch Katie, she's the McLaughlin Ben line with the sweep and no line, and we've seen that time and time again where that line has worked crossed together. So we continue to use lines that we know cross. Whereas if we know a line where they just don't click for whatever reason, we'd avoid that. But we try to just find a dog that we like, that the hand is fairly honest about the faults, so that we make sure that we don't end up really making a fault in our own line worse. And then we just go for it and we see what happens. I mean, it's not we try our best, but it's not an exact science. And I probably should mention health for us is important as well. We DNA test a lot. There are certain people in the UK, farmers particularly, that don't bother with that. We try and set an example a bit and try and test us for quite a few things, because we don't want to breed something unhealthy if we can help it.
We use carriers happily.
Yes. Yeah.
We use carriers all the time.
We just wouldn't
we want to mix and match.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, as my wife tells me.
Absolutely.
She's very
So, question here from the Nat Trimmer. Are there any particular traits that you guys are wanting to put into your line moving forward, and what are they?
I don't know really. I mean, there are things that we have in our line that I really like, but I don't want to lose.
Yeah, I think that's probably more important to us than putting anything in. If that makes sense, we'd rather work with the faults we've got. I think that's
I think for me the biggest thing that I've found especially in one of my dogs at the minute, which it's through the sweep line, is that she holds the weight. So if the sheep are leaning on her, she will lean right back without being told, and to the point where I actually have a hard time to hit a gate, because she'll lean so hard where they're off. I'm like, no, you need to. She won't come off the weight. And now that I've had that so strongly in her, if I take out other dogs and I'm like, well, what not even if they don't want to hold the weight, they'll slide off it, that type of thing. So it's, for me, now I've had that, I would very much try and keep that. I'd be willing to sacrifice other things that I can work on, but that ability for her to read the sheep and put herself where it's tough, that I want to hold on to. And it's very tricky, I think, to actually, we have a lot of dogs come for our hands that don't have that. And now I've had it, I want to hold on to it, really.
On that note, how do you guys go about picking a pup for yourselves?
You have a saying that they're all champions.
Yeah, they're all champions at that age. Yeah. I've found the best way of picking a pup is to let my wife, because I am rubbish at picking pups. I've had some Moya, who's my main bitch, and she's won the international braces time, and she's won the English national brace 3 or 4 times, but she's not actually got into the English team yet on her own right. She's just missed out for whatever. But she's won Deer Play twice. She's won that Berwyn trial we talked about. She's won Macclesfield twice, the double gather. She's a big day dog. She's won loads. She's a tremendous bitch, but just doesn't quite work to the national first man. But anyway, I digress. We've had 3 litters out of her, and she's been a bit hit and miss. And everyone I've had of her has been the miss. And I've picked there was one in the first litter, Sergio's Jim, half a white head, looked like Dale's Wits, mottle on the white half. The handsomest dog you've ever seen. Lovely nature, absolutely beautiful dog. Called him Leo. I thought that's a good name. He's Leo the lion. Yeah. Never looked at a sheep in his life. That pot liquor. Had to give it away as a search and rescue dog. That bloody thing. But he was good looking doing it.
Yeah, I think there are loads of schools. You see people like on Facebook debates about wait for one to come and pick you and all this sort of nonsense. Right.
What I would say though is, and all joking aside, is that you've got to like the look of the pup. You've got to. If you don't go and pick one you don't like the look of. One thing I hate is a pink nose. I hate pink pigment, and I want the black nose, which generally comes with a black mouth. Does it make a difference? Probably not. But I don't like the look of it. Do you know what I mean? I want a nice black. I like a dark eye. I like the eyes to be dark. I love a lucky black leg. I love a leg that is black down to the ankle on the back or the front. a lucky black leg. It makes no difference at all, but I like the look of them. So I like 3 hairs under the chin, 2 tails.
I think, yeah, if one stands out to you, we do like a sharp one.
Yeah.
I like a sharp one. I don't particularly mind a sharp or something like sharp. So I think a lot of that will come out. But yeah, I think you like it. If you get it home and you straight away, oh, I'm not sure I like this, then you're probably wasting your time before you start. You have to like it. You have to want to take it out. Yeah. Often we'll just get. We'll often keep what we get left with.
You're setting off on the right foot if you like them, aren't you? You know what I mean? You've got to spend a lot of time with it. You know, if they end up being your main dog, you've got to spend a heck of a lot of time with them. So if you don't like the look of them at the beginning, you're not setting off. You're not setting off in a great place, are you?
But we don't get hung up on it. Like
No, luckily Meg doesn't get hung up on what you
Katie was one of 11 and she just got sent over from Ireland. So some of the best dogs.
Sophie we sold. Sophie we sold as she bred and she kept her tail, and then we bought her back when she was just 9 months old.
I'm much more relaxed now than I used to be.
Yeah. So and Sweet, who's the main sort of dog. I had the choice of the litter, and I didn't keep him, and then I bought him back when he was a little bit older.
Yeah, so it's
a Jock who was, I had him from a little puppy, but I said to the breeder, there was 4 bitches and 1 dog, and I said, "Are you having a dog or a bitch?" He says, "I don't know." I said, "I'll tell you what, keep your favourite bitch and the dog, and then you decide if you want a dog or a bitch, and I'll have the other one." And that was Jock. So shows how good I am at picking pups. Yeah. No, I'm terrible.
So, is there anyone you'd like to see us sit down and have this sort of chat with on Dog Talk?
Sergio.
Yeah.
Say it again, sorry.
Can you hook that up for us?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
You might struggle with
You might struggle because he gets more passionate than we do.
Yeah.
We probably have conversations like this into the early hours
He's really
about how a dog's eyes look. He's a natural dog man, unbelievably natural.
Beautiful.
We really appreciate you guys giving us some time this evening for us, this morning for you guys.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Because there were 2 of you, and unfortunately we can't send the bag of Enduro Plus over to the UK, we're going to get you guys to pick a question each. So was there a question that you guys thought that stood out for either of you?
I like the one about what dogs have an impact on us.
That was quite a good one, yeah.
I like that one because that's about dogs for me.
Yeah.
That was fast.
I can't accept that. That was my question.
That was it. I like that one that said, what's your bank account number and sort code? Was not one of you from Nigeria and has £1 million in the bank?
We asked you that before that interview.
The one about training for internationals was a good one.
Yes,
Daniel Lenzo.
That was Daniel Lenzo. So Dan Lenzo, bag of Enduro Plus coming your way. And was there another one there between?
I think what other questions were there? We've been whittling that long.
You like the weakness one? That was a good question.
Which one was that?
About you work on a weakness. If you work on
Yeah, that was a good one. Same again.
That one.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Daniel Lenzo. 2 bags of Enduro Plus.
Same postage and packaging.
But in saying that, thanks again, guys. But you haven't got off that lightly just yet.
So the last question is, would you rather fight 1 duck the size of a horse or 20 horses the size of ducks?
For me, definitely 20 horses the size of ducks.
Yep. Why is that?
Because I think if there was, I'm only 5'2". So if it was a duck the size, how big a horse? Hang on, how big a horse?
14 free hands.
Oh no, definitely. I'm definitely going with duck the size of horse. Horses the size of ducks. Definitely.
And why is that? But you haven't finished.
Because I kick them off. I'll be like Bruce Lee and David Beckham's love child. Seriously, going everywhere.
Bend them like Bruce, you reckon?
Yeah, bend them like Brucey. That's it.
And how about yourself,
I'll
Meg?
go to you very similar. Would you rather find your mum and dad? Oh, no.
I'm a test tube baby. That's what I tell myself. I sleep better at night time thinking that.
At least your dad's a good shot.
Allegedly. On that note, guys, thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a good way to leave it. Yeah.
We could have spent hours more here
Yeah.
tonight. Like really got entrenched in this conversation. So thanks heaps. Really enjoyed it, this chat.
Yeah,
Cool.
it's been awesome, and good luck with your trials.
Just say anybody, we've got a nice page, Little Dale Sheepdogs, where you can follow the sort of garbage that we do, and it's all this sort of stuff. Yeah, we're thinking, we do TikTok videos and all that sort of stuff, and you can see the Dale and what we stand for in dogs. Yeah, and I'll get Meg to send you that
The link, yeah, I will.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
No
it.
worries. Good fun.
Hope you have a great day.
You too.
See you later.
Catch you later. Bye.